I sat directly across from my stepson, inside the sterile conference room of the Green Bay courthouse. My name is Franklin, a man 80 years old, preparing to sign away the logistics empire I spent my entire life building. I firmly pressed my pen onto the paper to surrender total ownership of the transportation corporation to the stepson of my late wife, Damon. My private lawyer, Lawrence, loudly protested the decision with clear desperation in his voice as I prepared to finalize the legal document. Franklin, you are completely crazy, because signing this document means you are voluntarily handing over the hard work of your entire lifetime to someone who does not deserve it at all. I simply waved my wrinkled hand to silence him, without offering any further explanation for my seemingly irrational decision. Before we uncover the terrifying secret behind this foolish surrender, please subscribe to the channel to support our upcoming stories. Damon leaned back into his leather chair with a highly arrogant smirk, while urging his legal representative to finish the procedure. Just let him sign the papers, since the old man has finally reached the time to rest, to hand over the ultimate power to someone who is actually capable. The lawyer of Damon Montgomery aggressively flipped to the financial obligation appendix located at the very back of the transfer contract. A sudden wave of pure panic washed over his face upon realizing the trap waiting inside the fine print. Wait a minute, because there is something incredibly wrong here, so you need to look at the debt obligation clause in this appendix right now. Montgomery trembled so violently that his heavy pen slipped from his fingers to crash loudly onto the wooden table before a thoroughly confused Damon. Early Monday morning, 2 weeks before the signing session, the funeral of my wife, Jacqueline, took place hastily under a cold rain at the cemetery in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Throughout the entire memorial service, Damon displayed a complete lack of grief as he repeatedly checked his gold wristwatch while standing beside the open grave. Before the pastor even finished the final prayer, he walked directly toward me to demand an immediate inventory of all corporate assets and private bank accounts. He showed no reverence for the memory of his own mother, treating her sudden departure merely as an inconvenient delay in his pursuit of financial control. Later that evening, shortly after the last grieving guest departed from our residence, Damon barged straight into my private study without bothering to knock on the door. He slammed his heavy palm onto my desk and demanded that I immediately surrender the keys to the family safe so he could personally divide the corporate shares. He glared at me while pacing back and forth across the room, making it clear that he would not leave without getting what he wanted. I deliberately shuffled my feet slowly across the hardwood floor while allowing my hands to tremble as I spoke in a hesitant voice. My objective was to convince him that the immense grief of losing Jacqueline had shattered my spirit and accelerated my physical decline. He observed my unsteady movements with an expression of blatant contempt, thoroughly convinced that an 80-year-old man posed no threat to his ambition. Damon towered over my desk and spoke with harsh authority to establish his dominance over the entire estate. My mother has been laid to rest, Franklin, so now is the time for you to open the safe and hand over all corporate shares for me to manage. I stammered a weak response about being far too exhausted to locate the keys tonight, which temporarily satisfied his arrogance and prompted him to retreat to his upstairs room. Around midnight, my chief financial officer, Gloria, arrived quietly through the rear entrance of my home to deliver an urgent financial dossier. We sat together at the kitchen table, where she opened a thick binder containing private ledger entries and certified banking records that she had quietly compiled over the past few months. Gloria explained that unusual cash withdrawals had been occurring across multiple subsidiary accounts, pointing directly toward unauthorized leverage created by Damon without board approval. Gloria placed her hand over the audit summary and spoke in a hushed tone to emphasize the extreme severity of the situation. Franklin, You must be extremely careful because Damon secretly used all his shares as collateral for private loans 6 months ago. The detailed documents revealed that he had accumulated millions of dollars in personal liabilities through high-risk speculative ventures in neighboring states. He desperately needed full ownership of our logistics corporation so he could liquidate company assets to appease his aggressive lenders before they filed public lawsuits against him. To further consolidate his control over my life, Damon had already exploited a medical power of attorney document that Jacqueline signed during her final stay at the hospital. He formally submitted those legal papers to our primary financial institution to request an immediate freeze on my secondary personal accounts under the false pretense of protecting an incapacitated senior citizen. This aggressive maneuver was engineered to cut off my access to daily operational funds, leaving me entirely dependent on his financial discretion for basic living expenses. The next morning, Damon intentionally stepped into my path as I attempted to walk through the central hallway toward the main living room. He held a thick stack of legal notifications and informed me that his legal team had already drafted the official paperwork to strip away my civil rights. He declared that if I refused to sign the voluntary transfer agreement, he would use his medical authorization to have me involuntarily committed to a locked memory care facility located in outer Green Bay. Damon stood firmly in front of the exit and delivered his final ultimatum with a complete lack of human empathy. "You are far too old to run a corporation, so sign the transfer papers, or I will send you to a nursing home next week." I nodded slowly with a fearful expression, pretending to submit to his cruel demands, while mentally calculating my next strategic move to protect the legacy of Jacqueline. Exactly at 11 o'clock on the following night, I quietly locked the heavy oak door of my study room before prying open the secret floorboard, where Jacqueline kept her personal lockbox. I used the tiny brass key to unlock the metal lid, discovering a large stack of intimidating financial documents hidden securely beneath a dark velvet cloth. Taking a closer look at the dense paperwork, I found multiple illegal promissory notes revealing how Damon had deliberately forged her signature to borrow millions of dollars from violent underground credit syndicates. The financial documents detailed astronomical interest rates alongside extremely aggressive repayment terms, proving that his highly praised corporate ventures were actually massive financial disasters requiring desperate funding measures. He had secretly leveraged his own mother's real estate properties as collateral without her explicit consent, desperately trying to cover up his monumental business failures before the federal tax authorities could initiate a formal audit. Beside those falsified debt agreements rested a small digital memory card enclosed within a transparent plastic case labeled with the exact date of her sudden passing. I immediately inserted the tiny storage device into my laptop computer, holding my breath as a high-definition video file slowly loaded onto the bright screen. The digital recording contained clear surveillance footage extracted from the hidden camera mounted along the second-floor hallway right outside her private bedroom. I watched the monitor closely as the security video displayed a fierce argument between my late wife and her aggressive son, occurring just minutes prior to her fatal medical emergency. The audio system recorded Jacqueline holding her chest in visible physical discomfort, while desperately trying to reason with her son regarding his disastrous financial decisions. "Damon, I will never sign the house mortgage papers because you are completely destroying your own life over those massive fraudulent debts." The video footage clearly showed him raising his voice in absolute fury, aggressively dismissing her legitimate concerns while demanding immediate access to her remaining liquid assets. "If you refuse to sign, then this entire corporation will collapse. So get your own medicine, because I have no free time to serve you." Following that incredibly cruel statement, he callously turned his back and walked away down the long corridor without showing a single ounce of hesitation or human empathy. The security camera captured the exact horrifying moment when a severe heart attack forced Jacqueline to collapse onto the wooden floor, while desperately reaching out toward his departing figure. His deliberate abandonment of a vulnerable person experiencing critical medical danger provided powerful circumstantial evidence regarding his ruthless financial motives against his biological mother. Watching him willingly let her die to secure his inheritance made my blood boil with an intense level of anger that I had never experienced before in my entire life. However, my decades of corporate leadership experience helped me realize that this isolated video recording might not guarantee an immediate criminal conviction in a strict federal court. A competent defense attorney could easily argue that the young man simply did not realize the true severity of her medical condition when he walked away from their heated argument. Therefore, I needed something much stronger to establish his undeniable criminal intent beyond any reasonable doubt during a future public judicial proceeding. I required comprehensive financial fraud records from a professional investigative agency to definitively prove that his actions were premeditated steps within a larger scheme to illegally acquire her entire estate. The forged loan documents provided an excellent starting point, but I needed official banking logs to completely destroy his fabricated reputation. I carefully returned the digital memory card alongside the forged loan documents into the metal lockbox before securing the wooden floorboard back into its original hidden position. I firmly decided to coordinate all future legal strategies with my trusted attorney to systematically complete every missing piece of this complex evidentiary puzzle without alerting the suspect. Walking over to the large glass window, I stared out into the dark suburban streets, while making a silent vow to ensure he faced maximum legal consequences for his horrific crimes. Damon, since you have shown absolute cruelty toward your own biological mother, do not blame me for using the full extent of the law to reclaim ultimate justice. 7 o'clock on the following Wednesday morning, I arrived at the private office of Lawrence to conduct a highly confidential family asset restructuring meeting. My close friend Clifford joined us in the boardroom to serve as an independent legal witness for the upcoming procedural steps. He brought comprehensive medical evaluations signed by certified neurologists to verify that I possessed complete mental clarity to execute binding financial decisions. Clifford meticulously reviewed every medical certificate before placing them onto the table to guarantee that no opposing counsel could ever claim I was acting under duress. Clifford looked directly at me across the conference table while offering his unwavering support for our aggressively planned legal strategy against my abusive stepson. Franklin, I am ready to testify before any court regarding your absolute sanity, so please do whatever you need to do. Lawrence immediately presented a massive stack of legal documents designed to establish an irrevocable trust fund dedicated exclusively to local orphaned children. We spent the next 3 hours systematically executing complex transfers to move the vast majority of my clean cash reserves into this newly protected charitable entity. We also successfully shielded all valuable commercial real estate properties by placing them permanently outside the reach of any future corporate bankruptcy proceedings. Lawrence thoroughly explained the specific legal mechanisms protecting the newly established orphan trust fund from any future litigation attempts. He emphasized that once the signatures were notarized, not even a federal bankruptcy judge could touch those charitable assets to satisfy corporate debts. This guaranteed that the hard work of my entire life would serve a noble purpose instead of paying off criminal loan sharks. This meticulous financial maneuver effectively stripped the primary logistics corporation of its tangible wealth while keeping the external corporate legal structure perfectly intact. The famous transportation company would now serve solely as a hollow legal shell, burdened entirely by the massive unauthorized loans that Damon had secretly acquired. The logistics corporation would technically continue operating under its registered name, but its internal financial organs were completely hollowed out. Lawrence carefully drafted the final ownership transfer contract, featuring a highly specific liability clause hidden deep within the dense financial appendix sections. This critical provision explicitly stated that the receiving party would accept total personal responsibility for any existing liabilities, alongside upcoming federal tax evasion penalties. Any individual attempting to seize control of the corporate entity would instantly trigger the hidden liability clauses buried deep within the fine print. By eagerly demanding total ownership of the company, the arrogant successor would legally absorb all the crippling private debt obligations he created himself. Lawrence systematically arranged the signed trust documents into a secure steel filing cabinet before turning his attention to the trap we just finished building. The clean assets are completely safe inside the trust fund, so the corporation now contains only the fraudulent debts that Damon created with his own hands. Following the completion of the asset protection phase, my lawyer pulled out a reinforced shipping envelope to prepare our ultimate criminal counterattack. He methodically packaged the forged promissory notes alongside comprehensive corporate audit logs detailing the unauthorized corporate money transfers from the past 6 months. He then placed the digital memory card containing the horrifying security footage from the second-floor hallway inside a protective plastic evidence case. These collected items constituted undeniable proof of severe financial fraud, coupled with criminal negligence, resulting in the untimely death of my beloved wife. We addressed the sealed package directly to the regional headquarters of a federal investigation agency with jurisdiction over interstate financial crimes. I handed the heavy envelope back to my legal counsel, while feeling a profound sense of resolution settling into my tired bones. Please send all these documents to the Federal Investigation Agency immediately, because he must pay the ultimate price for every single one of his actions. We concluded the lengthy morning meeting by agreeing to maintain absolute silence regarding the entire restructuring process until the final signing ceremony at the courthouse. Our primary operational objective was to project a highly convincing image of total submission to ensure Damon remained entirely blinded by his own toxic overconfidence. I promised to continue acting like a broken senior citizen who had finally surrendered to his cruel ultimatums regarding the immediate nursing home threats. He genuinely believed he had successfully cornered an isolated victim, completely unaware that he was eagerly preparing to sign his own inescapable financial death warrant. 8 o'clock on Monday morning, Damon led a squad of private security guards to seize control of the main lobby inside our corporate transportation headquarters. He strode purposefully toward the executive elevators, while flashing an arrogant grin at the terrified employees who scrambled to clear his path. Without wasting a single moment, he marched straight into the top-floor conference room to declare himself the absolute ruler of the company. Damon slammed a stack of fraudulent appointment letters onto the mahogany table before officially reading his self-proclaimed decree as the newly appointed chief executive officer. He pointed a shaking finger directly toward Gloria while issuing an immediate termination order to purge the executive board of anyone loyal to my leadership. Gloria stood her ground behind the mahogany desk while looking straight into his eyes before he could utter another threat. "Gloria, you are fired. Pack your personal belongings and get out of this corporation within 10 minutes. She gathered her leather portfolio with calculated slowness to ensure his temper flared to its absolute maximum level before she stepped out of the room. Damon turned his predatory gaze toward me, while reveling in the simulated vulnerability he expected me to display after weeks of targeted pressure. He walked up to my desk and leaned over the wooden surface to deliver his crude insults right in front of the assembled department heads. "Old man, your time is completely over, so clear this pile of garbage off my desk and go home to wait for death." I maintained a mask of total submission while staring downward into my empty coffee cup to feed his delusional sense of absolute victory. "Everything you are doing today will be recorded with precise accountability before the court of law, Damon." He laughed scornfully at my warning, while ordering his private guards to physically throw my personal briefcase out into the public hallway. I offered no resistance whatsoever as I picked up my leather bag and walked slowly toward the glass double doors without looking back. My deliberate compliance provided him with the final psychological push needed to trigger his reckless corporate asset liquidation strategy before afternoon closing hours. Unbeknownst to the overconfident usurper, Gloria had deliberately left the internal banking approval terminal unlocked on her workstation desktop before leaving the building. This calculated oversight acted as a potent digital lure designed to tempt his desperate need for immediate liquid funds to satisfy his ruthless loan sharks. Damon rushed eagerly toward the executive computer terminal the moment the office doors clicked shut behind the departed senior executives. He immediately initiated a rapid sequence of high-value corporate wire transfers designed to siphon company reserve funds directly into his personal offshore accounts. His primary objective was clearing his massive private credit liabilities before the aggressive debt collectors could track down his newly acquired corporate status. Every single one of those fraudulent wire transfer requests triggered an automated security hold embedded deep within the new trust architecture established by my legal team. The centralized banking control system intercepted the transactions, instantly routing them straight into a permanent pending review queue reserved for suspicious corporate activities. This automated administrative retention mechanism quietly recorded every unauthorized attempt to misappropriate corporate funds without triggering any external alarms on his office terminal screen. Damon leaned back in the executive leather chair with a satisfied grin, while believing he had successfully looted the treasury of my entire life's work. He remained completely oblivious to the fact that every single computer keystroke he executed was systematically logging fresh criminal charges of corporate embezzlement and abuse of authority. The automated audit trail was locking around his wrists with mathematical precision while he planned his celebratory dinner for later that evening. 48 hours before the court judgment hearing, loan sharks from an illegal credit syndicate began surrounding Damon's residence. The aggressive debt collectors blocked his driveway while demanding immediate settlement of the millions of dollars he had borrowed under false pretenses to fund his failed ventures. Damon fell into a state of utter panic when he realized that his recent wire transfer attempts at the corporate headquarters were stuck in pending authorization status. The automated banking security system prevented him from withdrawing a single dollar of corporate funds, leaving him completely exposed to the violent threats of his private lenders, who demanded their cash back instantly. Desperate to secure total legal control over the remaining corporate assets before his creditors took drastic action, he sought an immediate confrontation to force my final submission. Barging through my front gates shortly after dusk, Damon began pounding furiously on the wooden door of my home until the heavy lock frame splintered into pieces. He kicked the entrance wide open and burst into the living room while waving his fists in an uncontrollable fit of rage that revealed his complete loss of composure. He confronted me directly where I sat, threatening severe physical violence if I failed to execute the final property transfer agreements at the scheduled judicial session. The bank is locking the funds. An old fossil like you better show up at court to sign the papers on Friday, or else I will burn this entire house to the ground. I intentionally hesitated before answering, letting my hands tremble visibly while shrinking back into the leather armchair to project genuine terror and complete psychological defeat. I stammered my response with a trembling voice, ensuring he truly believed I had completely surrendered under his relentless intimidation and terrifying threats. I will go to court and sign everything for you, so please do not harm me anymore. Seeing my helpless posture and desperate compliance, Damon let out a harsh laugh while expressing supreme satisfaction over my apparent weakness and total inability to resist his demands. He believed his brutal intimidation tactics had successfully crushed my spirit completely. failing to notice the cold calculation behind my frightened expression. He turned on his heel and stormed out of the residence, slamming the damaged front door behind him as his high-powered sports car sped off into the darkness of the suburban streets. His arrogant mind was so consumed by visions of inheriting my life's work that he remained utterly blind to the invisible legal trap closing tightly around his future. The moment his vehicle disappeared down the main road, I dropped the fearful act completely and retrieved my encrypted smartphone from my desk drawer. I immediately called Lawrence to confirm the status of our coordination with federal authorities prior to the scheduled court proceeding at the Green Bay courthouse. My legal advisor answered on the very first ring, delivering crucial news regarding the Federal Investigation Agency's formal intervention strategy for the following morning. "Franklin, the federal officers have received the signal, so everything is ready for tomorrow." Lawrence explained that the federal investigation team had thoroughly verified our submitted financial evidence and cross-referenced the corporate audit logs with the hallway surveillance footage showing Jacqueline's tragic final moments. Special agents were already fully prepared to execute a federal arrest warrant the moment Damon attempted to formalize his fraudulent acquisition at the Green Bay courthouse. We jointly decided to maintain the exact court schedule without making any procedural changes, ensuring that the suspect remained completely unsuspecting of the impending law enforcement operation. Catching him in the middle of executing an illegal transfer contract inside a court of law would provide indisputable evidence for the federal prosecutor to secure a maximum prison sentence. I ended the call with Lawrence and sat quietly in the soft light of my study, feeling a profound sense of calm washing over my spirit. Every single variable in our complex plan had fallen into place with absolute precision, leading directly toward the public courtroom confrontation scheduled for the next morning. Damon was walking directly into a legal trap designed to hold him fully accountable for his corporate fraud and his horrific cruelty toward Jacqueline. I rested my hands on my lap and took a deep breath, knowing that my late wife would finally receive the justice she deserved. Tomorrow morning at the Green Bay courthouse, his destructive ambition would finally crash against the unyielding wall of justice. Exactly 9 o'clock on the morning of the final ruling at the Green Bay City Courthouse, I put my pen down after signing the last line, completing the entire property transfer process. Damon eagerly snatched the signed documents off the polished mahogany desk, sliding them toward his personal legal representative to verify the execution stamps. Damon's attorney, Montgomery, meticulously examined the attached corporate financial balance sheets while reviewing the dense legal clauses contained within the asset appendix. Montgomery grew visibly agitated as his eyes scanned the massive debt tallies listed under the corporate liability sections, realizing that something was terribly wrong with the transaction. He frantically recalculated the financial figures on his digital tablet, comparing them against recent court notices, before turning to deliver the catastrophic news directly to his stunned client. Montgomery shouted across the conference table in total disbelief as the horrific reality shattered their expectations of instant wealth. "Damon, you are finished. This corporation does not have a single dollar in cash, containing only the massive fraudulent debts that you created yourself." Montgomery explained to the courtroom that the logistics enterprise was merely an empty legal shell, encumbered by millions of dollars in predatory private loans, alongside massive unpaid tax liabilities resulting from years of fraudulent accounting practices. Damon stared at his legal counsel in complete disbelief, his face draining of all color as the crushing truth began to sink into his mind. Lawrence stood up smoothly from the plaintiff table, opening his leather briefcase to present notarized documentation from the state financial registry to the bench. He presented certified affidavits confirming that the trust structure was fully executed under state probate laws, rendering it completely immune to external corporate claims. He informed the magistrate that all clean corporate assets and liquid cash reserves had been permanently placed under the legal protection of an irrevocable charitable trust fund dedicated to orphaned children 2 full weeks prior. Because those asset transfers occurred well before the execution of the current agreement, the clean holdings were completely shielded from any corporate debt claims or liquidation attempts by aggressive private creditors. Damon leaped out of his leather chair, slamming both hands violently onto the counsel table while screaming hysterically at the bench. "No, you deceitful old man, I cancel the contract, Judge, I was scammed." Damon attempted to reach across the desk to rip up the executed documents, but the court bailiffs immediately stepped forward to restrain his arms. The presiding judge struck her wooden gavel down hard, commanding Damon to regain his self-control, while asserting that the personal liability assumption agreement was officially legally binding and completely irreversible under state contract law. Before Damon could formulate another angry protest, the heavy oak doors at the entrance of the courtroom swung wide open. 2 senior federal officers wearing tailored dark suits walked into the gallery alongside local court marshals, moving directly toward the defense table without hesitation. The lead special agent produced an official arrest warrant, bearing the federal seal, stepping between Damon and the side exit to block any sudden escape attempt. The FBI agent stated his formal authority in a clear voice that reverberated throughout the quiet judicial chamber. "Damon, you are under arrest for federal financial fraud and endangering the life of Mrs. Jacqueline, leading to her death, so you have the right to remain silent." The special agents immediately pulled Damon's arms behind his back, securing his wrists with heavy steel handcuffs before informing him of his full constitutional protections. Damon turned his tearful face toward me, sobbing hysterically, while begging me to withdraw the criminal evidence and save him from federal prison. I stood up straight, holding my head high, as I watched the law enforcement officers prepare to escort him out of the building. I looked directly into his panicked eyes, feeling no remaining sympathy for the ruthless individual who had shown no mercy toward his own mother during her final moments of suffering. "You have destroyed your own future through your insatiable greed and your heartless actions, so do not bother asking me for help or forgiveness ever again. I formally declared the absolute termination of all family ties between us," turning my back on his desperate cries as Lawrence and Clifford accompanied me out of the Green Bay courthouse toward a peaceful future. Exactly 1 month after the federal trial concluded, the final sentence for Damon was officially pronounced at the Wisconsin State Courthouse. The presiding magistrate delivered a massive 25-year federal prison sentence without any possibility of early parole, while strictly condemning his ruthless financial crimes. The federal judge formally ordered the immediate confiscation of his entire personal estate to properly compensate the numerous victims affected by his elaborate corporate fraud scheme. Damon stood silently beside his defense attorney in his orange inmate uniform, with his head bowed down, finally realizing the catastrophic consequences of his own destructive ambition. He offered no further protests as the federal marshals escorted him out of the courtroom toward the heavily armored transport vehicle waiting outside. Shortly after the judicial ruling concluded, the illegal credit syndicate mobilized their aggressive debt collectors to completely seize all of his luxury vehicles alongside his remaining residential properties. The aggressive loan sharks legally liquidated every single physical asset registered under his name, aggressively reclaiming their stolen funds through specialized asset recovery agencies. His insatiable greed ultimately left him completely penniless, ensuring he would have absolutely nothing waiting for him upon completing his lengthy incarceration. Leaving the courthouse proceedings behind forever, I traveled alongside Gloria and Lawrence to directly visit the Green Bay Child Protection Center. We walked slowly through the busy construction site, where several new educational facilities were being rapidly completed using the substantial capital provided by our irrevocable charitable trust. The site director guided us through the newly built classrooms, explaining how the secure funding would permanently guarantee access to higher education for hundreds of disadvantaged youth. We spent the entire afternoon reviewing the architectural blueprints for the upcoming vocational training workshops, confirming that every single dollar from the corporate liquidation was actively serving a righteous purpose. Gloria held my arm affectionately as we toured the modern library facility, expressing her profound gratitude for the meaningful direction our family wealth had finally taken. Seeing the joyful faces of the orphaned children running around the newly built playground brought a profound sense of warmth to my exhausted spirit. Standing before the beautiful dedication plaque honoring her memory, I finally found true inner peace, knowing that I had successfully secured absolute justice for Jacqueline. Her tragic passing had catalyzed this massive philanthropic initiative, transforming my lifelong assets into meaningful values that would continually uplift the local community for decades to come. I officially stepped down from all corporate responsibilities to begin my peaceful retirement, passing all remaining administrative duties to a board of highly dedicated trustees. Sitting quietly on a wooden bench beneath the shade of a large oak tree, I smiled serenely as I admired the kind legacy we were leaving behind for future generations. The dark shadow of familial betrayal had completely dissipated from my mind, allowing the bright light of renewed hope to illuminate the quiet remainder of my days. This story brings profound lessons regarding the universal law of cause and effect, alongside proper behavior within family life. Insatiable greed and a cruel attitude directed toward parents will always remain the shortest path leading an individual toward complete destruction regarding both personal honor and legal standing. The quiet patience demonstrated by a mature adult is never a mere expression of weakness, but rather a careful preparation, ensuring that absolute justice is executed in the most thorough manner possible. The greatest asset of a human life does not reside within the massive scale of a corporate enterprise or the vast amount of money stored inside a personal bank account. True wealth ultimately lies within the kind legacy and the positive values that we purposefully leave behind for the continuous betterment of society. Thank you to our wonderful audience for taking the time to follow this entire story from the very beginning until its satisfying conclusion. If you found the content delivering meaningful values, today please hit the subscribe button. Click like and share your personal perspective down in the comments section below. Your continued support remains a massive motivation for our production team to continue bringing high-quality scripts in the near future. We sincerely thank you for watching this presentation, hoping to see you again in our upcoming narrative projects, where we will share more compelling tales. We often hear from society that setting firm boundaries makes us incredibly selfish, especially when dealing with family members who demand our constant sacrifice. People sometimes condition us to endure quiet suffering just to keep the peace and avoid difficult confrontations with those we deeply love. If you have ever been called unreasonable simply for protecting your own emotional wellness, I want you to hear and internalize this truth clearly. You possess the absolute right to demand basic respect, to say no without endless explanations, and to want a much better life for yourself. Treating yourself with kindness and profound dignity does not oppose loving other people in any way whatsoever. In reality, honoring your own personal worth forms the absolute foundation of any truly healthy and sustainable relationship. You cannot pour fresh water from an empty cup, and you certainly cannot build a secure life with those who constantly drain your precious spirit. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice to walk away and protect your personal boundaries? Please share your own healing journey in the comment section below, because your unique experience might provide the exact comfort someone else desperately needs today. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this emotional video presentation. If this message resonated with your heart, please leave a like, subscribe to our channel, and check the description box below for more empowering videos. Always remember that guarding your inner peace is never a selfish act, but rather the ultimate necessity for living a beautifully fulfilled life.